Okay. Welcome to AWS Startups. So section one, once again, just starting off on developing an idea. So a founder's first goal is to obviously create a product that solves a conflict that customers have, and the founder should ask certain questions when coming up with an idea, like who is the product for, why is the product needed, what problem does it solve, is this important enough, and is there a need for this product? So, a quote from Steve Blank, who's a famous Silicon Valley entrepreneur, says, more startups fail from a lack of customers than from a failure of product development. So, now for finding a co founder. The most successful startups have both a founder and a co founder. Despite this, most failures in startups are usually caused by conflicts between the two founders. So, it's really important to be truthful about your strengths and your weaknesses in order to find a co founder that complements your skills. Tips for hiring include don't give everybody a high title, don't follow major companies' recruiting techniques, hire those who have faith in your companies, and also have trial periods for the potential employees you could be working with. Now, understanding equity and compensation models. Don't leave anything out of the discussion when it comes to equity distributions amongst co founders. The unequal split of equity and profit can lead to distrust, and giving an even share to each co founder helps the company come first. Also, make sure that you have the equity discussion early so that lawyers and shareholders will not need to be involved. Debunking myths. So, it's important that you understand that renting an office is unnecessary when starting off. You can literally just work anywhere like a garage, library, coffee shop, or even a spare bedroom. If a formal work setting is required, however, you can visit AWS lofts to be in the proximity of technical experts. You can keep an eye on monthly expenses like rent and payroll. You can measure the rate at which profit grows. You can measure the cost of acquiring new customers. And also, you can follow set timetables in order to keep on pace with goals. So, customer discovery. So, you want to validate your idea by discussing your product with the people you know. And this could be people like friends, family, and even potential customers. Customer discovery is evaluating, correcting, and refining your idea. And because of this, it requires a repetitive cycle, which includes building, learning, testing, and evaluating. The more customer feedback you receive, the greater advantage you have. And you obviously want to give customers what they are craving. So, another video, the videos that are on the end of each day are going to be found at um, the description of the live stream once it's ended. Okay, section two, how to find and listen to customers. So it's been proven that interviews with customers are ultimately the best way to receive feedback. And this is going to help you figure out what matters to them. Every idea starts with finding a new way to please these customers. And the goal is to constantly update and to keep up with the needs of them. You want to determine whether your services are going to be used by uh, the average consumer or other businesses. And we have a few tips on the side that you could use when communicating with your customers. You should probably stay away from vague inquiries and avoid yes or no questions. And you want to inquire fundamental questions which are designed to evince insight and get the most information possible. General open-ended questions are more beneficial, and always end conversations by asking your customer who else you can talk to. So now for customer validation and understanding your market. Customer validation is finding and comprehending the customer's market. Enthusiasm doesn't necessarily mean that you have a large market. But in order to figure out how large the market is, you can ask these few questions. Is it large enough to support your business? How many people are going to be buying your product? Is it a new or already existing market? You can check the click through rate or the CTR rate, and you can also create a sign up page for your product's launch. Consider how much money it's going to take in order to reach your markets. Software only products cost much less as compared to hardware only costs, and also consider your implementation roadblocks, such as the following certain rules for the specific industry involved. Know the competition and learn from their mistakes in order to help set you apart. Building a prototype. So, a prototype is something that's created in order to see whether or not a certain product will succeed after launch. Excuse me. Focus on learning about your product rather than coding and adding to it. A prototype has to be added in order to make the product best suited for customers' needs. And it's important that when creating the prototype, the process shouldn't be hurried. Also, check frequently to make sure that your prototype follows your goal. Don't get distracted while you're making the prototype. Now, introducing the concept of an MVP. So, an MVP also stands for minimum viable product or a minimal viable product, and it's typically the first product that a company makes. It's usually thought of as the simplest edition of a product that still proves a hypothesis, and it requires as little features as possible in order to support the key function. An MVP is the first product which is to be ready for the consumer market, and it tests a hypothesis, and it's a bare bone structure of what the idea was meant to be. Just like a prototype, an MVP isn't going to be ideal though, and it usually prioritizes functionality over aesthetics. So, how to develop an MVP? Building an MVP has multiple repetitive cycles. It goes through processes like designing, building, deploying, and measuring. With each addition of new processes, the MVP becomes steadily better, and it allows for the quick and responsive feedback from users. Make sure that you keep your MVP simple. And there's a quote from Reid Hoffman, who's an internet entrepreneur, and he says, "If you aren't embarrassed by the first version of your product, you shipped too late." Also, add features after your hypothesis has been verified, so you know that you're not wasting time and resources. Another video that will be found in the description. Now on to section 3. Section 3 starts off with sprints. Sprints are processes that are used often when developing software, and it's a certain amount of time where predetermined work is completed. It has a fixed theme and objective, and a deliverable function. Sprints should last about 1 to 2 weeks, and the shorter it is the better because your goals won't change. You should save customer feedback for the next sprint. Prioritization is important because you want to focus on primary business functions, and also focus on high effect and quick to build work. You have the capacity to build one great product, so make sure it's the right one. That's from Nikki Stone, a senior software developer at AWS. The recommendations after sprints are continuous implementation and constant delivery. Potential pitfalls. An anti-pattern is a universal response to a conflict which is unproductive. Being prepared for an anti-pattern is going to help prevent whenever they undoubtedly show up. Technical debt is going to gather when engineers rush the work instead of focusing on both quality and proper implementation. Technical debt doesn't necessarily come from laziness, but instead a strategic decision to swiftly eradicate a conflict. Not generalizing code can lead to extra coding work and refactoring, and it's going to be undifferentiated heavy lifting. Excuse me. Customers want the product, and they don't mind you borrowing from existing resources that you might have. Here are some fundamentals of working with AWS. One-door decisions and two-door decisions are the two types of decisions that might be made. They don't happen equally. Two-door decisions are the most common and are going to occur the majority of the time. One-door decisions should be thought through thoroughly, and security decisions are one-door decisions because they can't be remade again. When making security decisions, one should consider both their and AWS's responsibilities. They have to make sure that they know who gets access to certain objects among the workforce and how much access different users are going to receive. Startups on AWS are going to receive enterprise level security, and AWS offers SSL and DDoS protection. SSL stands for Secure Sockets Layer. Standard security technology for creating a protected link between a web server and a browser is SSL. I mean, not SSL, is present. DDoS stands for the Distributed Denial of Service. It is a cyber attack that interferes with the services of the host. And startups have to know the relation of their product with the government, healthcare, and more. They must follow any regulations and rules that are present in the field. Points of integration also have to be considered because developers won't be able to understand a product without the proper documentation. An API is an application programming interface, and it's a set of guidelines which are used to connect with another person's software. It's also important to select the correct database for the type of data you need to store. So now an introduction to data architecture with AWS. A monolithic architecture, sorry about that. A monolithic architecture is an architecture that combines all of the working parts of an application, such as data input, output, processing, air handling, and more, all together into one singular program. It allows for the rapid development because you don't need to make processes ahead of time. A well-designed monolith can be scaled horizontally and then broken apart at a later date. Architecture applications like Amazon Elastic Beanstalk are going to automate all processes for you, and it's much simpler to work and handle. Microservices are independent services that each perform their own functions. They work together as a single product, but if one microservice goes down, the others are unaffected. They're good for scaling large systems, but they take longer to build. Optimize the data architecture for speed. Serverless is a type of architecture where servers that have code running on them don't need to be set up by the user. This grants more time to focus on the code, and it automatically scales for the user to avoid having predict customer traffic. So assisting with legal needs. A common legal decision that a business makes is whether or not it becomes a legal entity. A legal entity is when a company gains legal rights and obligations, such as tax filings. There are multiple types of these entities, like a limited liability. A limited liability is the detachment of personal resources from business resources. It prevents the business's owner's responsibility and losses and legal liability. It exists to help business owners take risks without the fear of legal action or liability. However, it's not perfect and it's not a get out of jail free card. So, what are unincorporated entities? These are businesses that don't have the limited liability and are known as unincorporated entities. The two types are sole proprietorship and general partnerships. Sole proprietorship is owned by businesses and managed by one person. On the other hand, a general partnership has numerous owners and splits up the responsibilities amongst these owners. There's no legal difference between the owner and the business itself. Sole proprietorship is cheaper to start, but it comes with less overhead. And sole proprietorship risks the owner's personal resources. Another video for the description. Okay, section 4, finding a lawyer. An option for businesses that are a legal entity is to converse with large startup firms. These types of firms don't make business owners pay up front, but instead they take a percentage of the company. If businesses don't want to work with large law firms, they can work with startup friendly firms such as Atrium. Atrium is a corporate law firm that uses machine learning software in order to automate legal processes. Another option to find counsel is colleague and friend recommendation. So NDAs, IP, and other legal considerations. An NDA stands for a non-disclosure agreement, and it's an agreement that prevents the unauthorized disclosure of secrets. If one's assigning development work to an outside organization, then that organization should be signing an NDA. A venture capitalist provides startups with funds but receives a return investment, and the venture capitalist organization is most likely not going to sign an NDA. A founder's agreement is a necessary legal step when there are multiple founders involved. It can outline the responsibilities of each founder involved. There's no template to be used as a reference, but it can be hard to publicate. There's often numerous negotiations, and it can be very time consuming to finish. What's an intellectual property or IP protection? This is a type of legal concept that provides legal protection for assets. The trademark is a type of IP protection which shields a product of a company from being copied. It patents guard of an organization's product, and it gives the patent owner the right to prevent others from using, creating, or even selling the patented product. These patents usually last several years. Copyright is something that guards original artistic work, and for most startups, it's the primary IP protection. Now for an introduction to fundraising. Fundraising is a full-time job and should be taken seriously. Venture capital firms invest in companies they believe in and hope they will receive a large return. There are multiple investment types like pre-seed and seed, and Series A and Series B. Pre-seed and seed is an investment that occurs early on, even before the company shows that the product will work. Series A and Series B is funding that is used to help continue the scale of business. The pressure to deliver when a VC invests can be high, and it is likely that a business, even with this support, is going to be out of business in only a few years. Some VCs also work in pre-seed or seed funding. Pre-seed funding typically occurs in the early stages of product development, and pre-seed fund in these investments range from $50,000 to $250,000. Seed investments, on the other hand, range from $250,000 to $1 million. In 12 to 18 months, a seed VC may want you to fundraise 2 times the amount given, and when fundraising the VCs, it does add another person to answer to. There are funding sources outside of VC though. These include angel investors, non-dilutive funding, crowdfunding, and accelerator programs. Angel investors are wealthy people who are looking to passively fund startups with capital in exchange for equity and convertible debt. They don't expect or want a 50 times return on the investment, but instead have a different motivation. They usually invest about $25,000 to $250,000. For some angel investors, a 3 to 5 times return would be wonderful. Non-dilutive funding. So this is money that is incorporated in order to support the product without having to give up any equity. Examples like this are bank loans or university or federal grants. There's also crowdfunding, and examples include Kickstarter and GoFundMe. This may assist in providing early adopters, but it may be more difficult than seed rounds. And accelerator programs are group-based programs where entrepreneurs produce their ideas into reality. They select a tiny percent of companies and help to make these companies grow. They usually invest approximately $20,000 to $150,000. $20,000 to $150,000. They ask for a 5 to 7% equity return investment. They also offer mentoring, training, and feedback, while usually lasting about 3 months. Crafting a fundraising narrative. A fundraising narrative shows why one is spending money in the first place. It's not the same as a pitch deck because it's much less thorough. Although this is true, the primary questions still have to be answered. Like, what are you creating? What's the most captivating factor of the business? How much progress is being made? And what are you striving to achieve? The narrative should be short and sweet, and it should have the ability to informally be discussed with potential investors. It should be quick so that it can be explained in 20 seconds or less. The first section should be who you are, what you're doing, and why it's important, and the last 10 seconds should be progress, milestones, and long-term vision. Find the one persuasive reason as to why a company should receive investment. A good narrative should have a strong financial plan to support its claim, and these financial models are essentially inferences. Another video, and day 5, or section 5, what makes a good pitch deck? Your pitch deck is basically your business card, and it's given to those who are in the best position to help you, like investors or mentors. One of the first things customers are going to see is going to leave a huge impression about your company. The key areas of a pitch deck are the problem and solutions, business model, and market. Creating a deck, you want to start with whatever is the most persuasive, to keep it incisive, and it's better to be concise than to make investors disinterested. It's typically 10 to 13 slides long, and you want to have that your deck answer the whys behind the investments, like why is this a good opportunity, why is this the proper team to do it, and why is this round of funding necessary. So how to prospect your initial fundraising funnel. Generate contention among investors. The 3 to 1 rule is important in order to generate competition between the investors. Be in the final stages of a negotiation with the 3 investors at the same time. It's estimated that you need about 10 meetings between these investors in order to create a 3 to 1 situation. Some investor companies invest in numerous companies, while others only invest in a limited amount. Tools like Crunchbase and LinkedIn are going to help you find investors if you can't find 20 or more to start with. Other entrepreneurs have VC companies that work with them, which make it easy to get advice on how to approach them. Also, focus on people in the VC business and not just firms. So, initiating fundraising mode. Spend approximately 10% of time creating relationships with potential investors and founders later in the process. Relationships are going to make it easy and quick in order to find these high level investments. And you want to negotiate and finalize with an investor before moving on and searching for a new group. Understand the different types of people who are working at the VC firm, like partners, venture partners, principals, and associates. Partners are the people who are making the most decisions. Venture partners are part time workers who look to source deals and make couple investments. Principals are new to the business and are just starting to make deals, and associates can't make investments but can help business owners navigate through the investment process. Also, attempt to have a mutual acquaintance that introduces you to the investor. So, understanding the stages of growth. There are multiple stages of company growth, all with different goals. Two stages on this slide. Number one is delivering a product. So, can your team build something consumers are going to buy? Is the product ready to be sold on the market? And after their first sales, one has to ask themselves if they can turn their few customers into a full customer base. The objective here is to obtain a large amount of sales. Stage two is expansion. Survival is basically guaranteed at this point, and investors are guiding businesses to further success. The startup's now a more mature business and isn't considered a beginner. But you have to do your homework before you have a chance of reaching stage two. How to build a product roadmap. So, a guide through the whole business process from making a product to making your first sale is a product roadmap. Create milestones throughout the map in order to help shareholders know where key important events are in a basic timeline. A/B testing helps set apart two options when coming across how a certain variable must function. The A/B test brings about valuable results about which option will perform the best based on a particular parameter or goal. It helps make decisions less biased. An important decision when making a roadmap is deciding when to pivot. If your product development team starts heading in the wrong direction, a pivot to your roadmap can help things get back on track. If something isn't working, don't force it and don't cause more trouble. Instagram pivoted their idea from being a check-in product to a place to post personal pictures to share with the world. They then stripped off any non-essential features in order to both save money and better fit the app. Product and channel fit. Ask yourself how effective is the product at having customers find it publicly. There are some common startup growing pains. These can cause long hours and be extremely demanding. There are ways to conduct business with greater results for your employees and your own product as well. Create and enforce strict limits on work hours. Throw all the energy into a startup is going to hurt the product and its effectiveness. You want to generate nourishment codes for all employees or a finish line. Pay a great amount of attention to the hiring process. Employing people that fit your company culture is the ultimate goal. Interviewing is also critical, and it's important to consider if a candidate is going to contribute and not just be a non negative. A good interview question would be to ask how the candidate worked through a real life problem. And at a startup with less than 100 employees, the CEO themselves should be making these hiring decisions. And culture. Culture is the persona of your company. It's a mixture of work environment, the company mission, values, ethics, expectations, and goals. Think about having third party voices giving a voice into the culture of your company because this might be a possible benefit. Create a culture that can accommodate not just yours, but the company's strengths and weaknesses. Culture is not equal to perks, though, and it's more difficult to generate. Find different ways to talk to employees in mass. Information is received different by different people, mentally speaking. Multiple passwords will have to be used in order to spread the necessary information. A founder should personally interview at least 50 to 100 people for the first hires, like this last slide said. Develop effective interview questions, and defining the culture is not the end. This is the bibliography for the slides. Thank you for watching, and we will